Today I'm honored to be joined by Antonio and Nikki, the parents of Christian. I'll have a little more to say about that here shortly. We need to talk today about some serious issues that are facing people in British Columbia, facing all of us as a society, and that is how we make sure we provide real support for mental illness in this province, as well as how BC recovers and how we deal with addiction treatment. In BC today, too many people are suffering from mental illness and we're not providing the support that's needed. So I want to talk a little bit about our conservative approach about how we'll address this. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we have standards in this province for wait times, maximum wait times, and that it can be enforced in this province to make sure that people who need mental health services will receive those services in a timely way. We also need safety for patients and communities. Where you have individuals who may be at risk of harming themselves or others, we need to make sure that there is safe places for them to be able to receive treatment and make sure that quite frankly, that treatment is not being done on the streets. Early mental health intervention is critical, especially in schools. We need to make sure that we can provide the kind of support that's going to be needed within schools to be able to work with schools, with teachers, and to make sure that those sort of services can be made available to try to deal with these issues at an early age. But a big piece of that is also in supporting the increased family involvement. Make sure that families are engaged and involved in what needs to happen and what the best practices are for the children as we go through to the treatment that's needed. We also need to make sure we've got accountability with mental health. So we want to establish an independent representative for mental health to provide oversight, public reporting, and accountability to our health system. It's critical as we build out the support that's needed in this province for mental health that we make sure we have somebody who's watching over and reporting so we can make sure we are improving as we go. So we know these things are going to be challenging and we need to make sure that we have the right track for being able to improve things. We're standing today, of course, in front of the Riverview site here in Coquitlam. It's a site that was closed down many decades ago now. We want to establish this site and redevelop this site as a leading center of excellence in Canada for mental health care and addictions recovery, including secure treatment. We need to look at facilities like this and make sure that we can build out what is needed and make sure we can be leaders both in Canada and the world. That also means that there's some complexities there that we'll need to deal with the federal government on the Canadian Health Act, but I'm confident that these are the things we'll be able to deliver for British Columbians. Across the province, of course, we don't have the secure housing that is needed. We need to be able to build out secure housing units to create safe facilities for the treatment of individuals, make sure that they're safe both for themselves as well as the staff and to other persons. We need to strengthen the mental health services across the province. There are too many places in British Columbia where mental health services are just not available. So we need to make sure that we expand out those services so that mental health can be received in various regions around the province when needed. It also means, quite frankly, that when somebody is having a mental health crisis, they need to be able to get help as soon as possible. So we will expand the 911 system to be able to include the ability to be able to call in for mental health and for try to get the expert and rapid response that's needed for these. We're also going to expand peer-assisted care teams. It's very important that these teams are in place. They help to relieve a lot of pressure off our first responders in British Columbia. When it comes to recovery from addictions in BC, there's a tremendous amount of work to be done. I'm just going to leave a number here for you to think about. Across Canada last year, just over 5,700 people lost their lives to addictions. In British Columbia, that number was just over 2,500. Almost 50% of the people who have died from overdoses in Canada happen right here in British Columbia. That is a condemnation of the approach that we are taking in British Columbia. It is not working, and it needs to make sure that we take every step we can to be able to address this. Too many lives have been lost in British Columbia 14,000 people have lost their lives. That includes over 12,000 boys and men in this province who have died from overdoses. Our current approach, like I say, is not working, so we are going to take a very different approach in terms of how we deal with this. The first and key most piece is prevention. We need to appoint an addiction specialist who's going to be working across government to make sure that we have a coordinated response across government for dealing with prevention of addiction. We want to end decriminalization. It has taken tools away from police to have a civil society, and it is obviously not working in terms of when you look at the numbers of people who are dying from overdoses. We will stop the drug legalization. This whole issue of safe supply is not safe. It is dangerous. This should not be the approach that we take in British Columbia. We will be working with schools to deal with drug awareness. It is key right now when I hear the fact that some drugs today, which from this government are deemed to be safe, are being sold to kids in school as saying these are safe drugs. They are not safe. They are dangerous drugs, and they're creating the next generation of addicts in British Columbia. So we'll also make sure that we go after the source of these deadly drugs that are happening in this province. And that includes everything from going after it in the ports and dealing with this on the streets, of course, and making sure that we bring a halt to government-sanctioned distribution of these drugs and as part of our efforts to go after the illegal sources. Prevention is a key in terms of this, but we also need to deal with issues such as harm reduction and accountability. So that's why we will be holding overdose prevention sites accountable to make sure that they're meeting the highest standards across this province. And unlike David Eby and his government, we will not hesitate to shut down sites that refuse to abide by strict standards of conduct. No more free drug for all drugs near our schools or playgrounds or spilling out into residential communities. We're going to also make sure that every safe consumption site is a meaningful gateway to treatment. As we build out additional treatment, everything from doctor-prescribed treatment right through to long-term treatment, we need to make sure that we do everything we can to connect people who need it to those treatment and those services. We will also establish a virtual opioid dependency program. Many people may want to be able to go online, to be able to access a specialist, to be able to help them with addiction and suggested treatment. And I think it's key that we'll be able to have that available to help people through their addictions and through dealing with the issues that have to happen to get to a recovery. A key piece in British Columbia is we will fund abstinence-based recovery. Currently, British Columbia will not fund abstinence-based. They will only fund what they call harm reduction. And it's by far, when you look across the province in British Columbia, the approach to harm reduction is not working, especially when you look at the number of people that have died tragically from overdoses. We need to make sure that there is other options in this province that can be far more effective, such as abstinence-based recovery. We're going to ensure those, of course, there's a wide availability of nasal naloxone. That saves lives. The next big step, of course, is to make sure that we have treatment and recovery. So we're going to cut wait times for voluntary addiction treatment. There's no question in my mind, if you are going through treatment and you go through detox, you need to be able to get into recovery, and over the long run, you cannot be waiting. It's just a trap that goes back into addictions. In addition, when you have somebody that wants to be able to have that, I've heard too many stories of people having to wait 3 months or even 5 months to be able to get into space in British Columbia. Lives can be lost over that period of time. We need to make sure that we do everything we can so that there is no wait times for people to get in. We want to integrate treatment into the correctional health systems, as people who are being in our jails, who have been committed crimes, that are suffering from addiction. We want to do everything we can to be able to help them as well to get off that addiction, to make sure that they can, when they've done their time associated with crime, they're also in a situation where they can come out and move away from addiction and the life of addiction. There will be no financial barriers to detox and treatment. This is something that's critical in BC. We cannot be holding people back from receiving the treatment they need in British Columbia from financial barriers. We want to close that gap, as I mentioned, between detox and care. Housing with treatment is going to be critical. For people who are addicted, who are homeless, we need to make sure that we have treatment and recovery that is part of housing. It's a critical piece in British Columbia that is not being done today, certainly not being done by David Eby and his government. We want to build a recovery community with regional recovery, a government providing professional care and guidance for those recovering from addiction. The program will allow for up to 12 months to live in participation. It's a significant piece when you're talking about recovery. For some people that can happen quickly. For some people they need that additional support. So we want to make sure that's there. We want to also make sure that we have a safe transition to treatment and not safe supply. This is a key piece that makes sure that the paths that go forward, whether it's doctor prescribed treatments all the way through like I say, long-term care, we want to make sure it's there and it's not this treadmill of safe supply and keeping people on drugs in British Columbia. We need to be able to get in there to get people safe and to make sure that they have a way to be able to build a productive life. Of course, there are certain situations which are critical in British Columbia where government needs to come in with intervention. And I've talked about this many times. Where you have a child who is suffering from addiction, where you have somebody who refuses to go into treatment, as a parent, there is nothing that can be done in British Columbia currently. We think we should change that. We want to have involuntary, compassionate care that gives an opportunity for parents to be able to give those children that life, that opportunity to be able to recover, to make sure that they can live full and productive lives. This will be a new law that we'll introduce in British Columbia, and we're naming it after Christian. Christian is an individual who lost his life, and the parents who are here today tried to do everything they could for Christian to try to get him into treatment, to try to get him through this, and only to be frustrated by a system. That is just wrong. Any parent in this province would want to do everything they can for their child, and we'll make sure that's available in British Columbia. We're also going to make sure that we build specialized housing for those complex needs, for these issues, for people, even adults, that need to go into involuntary treatment as we go through. At the end of the day, there is enough people who have passed in this province. By far, we are the worst province and the worst performers in this country. It is a tragic story of failure in British Columbia to deal with addictions. This is something that we need to bring to an end. We need to make sure that we are known for recovery and compassion and making sure that people can find their ways beyond drugs to be able to live full and productive lives in British Columbia. That's a commitment from a Conservative government. And at this time, I would like to invite Nikki to share some words about her son's story.
My name is Nikki D'Souza. Thank you. And I'm here today because earlier this year I had to bury my son, Christian. I'm not the only mother, like other mothers. I lost my son to a crisis that didn't have to take him. A crisis made worse by bad policies and irresponsible leadership. Christian was just 28 when he died. He had his whole life ahead of him, but he needed help, and he deserved better. No parents should ever have to feel this pain. We shouldn't have to bury a child because the political class isn't willing to act. No parent should have to bury their child because their government is more interested in ideology than saving any lives. They say that this is a drug toxicity epidemic. But who do you blame when the biggest drug dealer is the government? My son is dead because of the NDP government. Antonio and I did everything we could to try to save our son. But Eby's government refused to help us. I'm standing here today because it's time for this cruel experiment to end. I'm one person, And I know there are so many others across BC who know this pain all too well, and nobody should know this pain. I've listened to John. He spoke about these issues, and I heard what he said, and I knew they understood what I was going through, and that makes a huge difference to somebody who nobody else would listen. My son was more than a statistic. He is more than a statistic. He was smart, he was kind, and he had so many dreams. But addiction took hold of him, and we watched as it just destroyed everything. He needed help, and it never came despite our desperate pleas for help. The government ignored us, and they ignored my son who died. I've never done this before, but this election I will be voting Conservative. I will be doing so fully committed to voting Conservative. I will never again vote NDP, and their radical policies killed my son. I know I'll be voting for John because I know that he will do whatever it takes so that no one else will feel the way that we feel. And I hope he wins so that nobody else actually goes through what we're going through right now. Tonight we're going to watch the debate. We're going to do so with one empty chair. Sorry.
Thank you for coming out again today. And at this time, I'll take questions.
Thank you. Given the severity of today's announcement, I will only be taking questions related to the announcement. Anyone who asks off-topic questions will be immediately cut off. There will be more than enough time later today to ask any other questions. That being said, Zussman with Global, one question, one follow-up.
You full well know that for a long time there's been debate around what to do with Riverview. There were legitimate reasons for why they closed the facility. How would you do things differently in 2024 compared to what happened when this was closed?